The morning after we buried Elam, I woke up before the sun. The house was completely still, no footsteps on the floorboards above me. No sound of him dressing in the dark the way he had for 22 years, the particular order of it, belt before boots, always. Just still. I lay there for a long time, and then I did something I had not done in 22 years of marriage. I stayed in bed until I wanted to get up, not until the stove needed lighting, not until the children needed feeding, they were grown by then, most of them. Not until I heard him moving, and understood that the house required me to begin. I stayed until I wanted to. And when I finally got up and stood at the kitchen window watching the sky go from black to gray to the particular pale gold that comes over the fields in November, I felt something I did not have a name for. It took me 3 weeks to find the word. The word was mine. The morning was mine. The window was mine. The decision to stand there for another 10 minutes was mine. I had not known until that morning how long it had been since something was simply mine. My name is Hannah. I was raised Old Order Amish in Holmes County, Ohio. I was married at 19 to a man named Elam. I left the community at 28. Elam and I had been separated for many years by the time he died, but in the Amish world, separated does not mean what it means on the outside. There is no clean line. There is shunning and there is doctrine and there is the particular gravity of a community that does not release people easily. When Elam died, I went back. For the burial, for the children, for the thing that felt like the right thing to do even when I could not fully name why. What happened in the days that followed is what I am going to tell you today. It is a complicated story. It is not a story about relief, or not only that. It is a story about what it means to be a widow in a community that has very clear ideas about what a widow is for. If you are new to this channel, subscribe now. I tell the stories that did not get told when I was inside them. That is the only purpose of this. First, I need to explain what widowhood means inside an Old Order community, because it is not what most people on the outside would assume. A widow in the Amish world does not become an independent woman. She becomes a category, a managed concern. The community moves quickly. This is not cruelty, I want to be precise about that. It comes from a genuine theology of care, a belief that a woman alone is a woman exposed, and that the community's responsibility is to ensure she is not left without structure. But structure and care are not always the same thing. And what I experienced in the days after Elam's burial was a very efficient, very well-intentioned system, moving to enclose me before I had taken 3 breaths of air on my own. The Ordnung does not have a provision for a woman who is comfortable alone. It does not have a category for a woman who has, after many hard years, found her footing outside the community and does not require enclosure. It has a category called widow, and the widow category has a procedure. You have heard parts of this story in other videos. I will say it briefly here for those who are new. Elam and I were married for 9 years before I left. Those 9 years were not uniformly terrible. There were good seasons, there was genuine shared work and faith and the particular intimacy of building a life in close quarters with another person. There was also harm. The kind of harm that does not announce itself, that arrives dressed as doctrine and duty and the ordinary expectations of a wife inside a system that has very specific ideas about what a wife is. I left at 28. I have told the story of that leaving in another video, the hidden money, the November morning, the 3 phone numbers in pencil inside a Bible. What I have not told yet is what happened after Elam got sick, and what happened after he died. Elam was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 14 months before he died. His sister called me. We had not spoken in years. She called the way people call when the ordinary rules are suspended by something larger, quietly, without preamble. Just the information, and then silence while I absorbed it. I drove back to Holmes County 3 times during his illness. Not because the community welcomed me, I was still shunned in the formal sense, though by then the shunning had become more procedural than passionate. Not because Elam asked me to. He did not. I went because of my children. Because watching their father die is something children should not do without their mother present if their mother can be present. Each time I went, I sat in the farmhouse that had been mine for 9 years and felt the particular disorientation of returning to a place that remembers you as a different person. The wood stove was the same. The window that faced east was the same. The sound of horses in the barn in the early morning was the same. But I was not the same, and the community did not know what to do with the version of me that had returned. Elam died on a Tuesday in October. He was 51 years old. The burial was 3 days later, the way it is done. 300 people, maybe more. The particular silence of an Amish funeral, not the silence of absence, but the silence of a community that has learned to hold grief together without performance. I stood with my children. I wore plain clothing because I had brought it, because I understood that showing up in English clothes would have made the day about me instead of about him. And the day was not about me. After the burial, people came to the house. Women filled the kitchen the way women fill Amish kitchens at every significant moment, with food, with efficiency, with the quiet authority of people who know exactly what to do and do it without being asked. And within 2 hours of us returning from the cemetery, the procedure had already begun. The deacon came to speak to me before the afternoon was out. He was a kind man. I want to say that. He had known Elam all his life. He was genuinely grieving. He sat across from me at the kitchen table with his hat in his hands, and he spoke with real care. He said, "Hannah, the church wants you to know that you are not alone in this. We will take care of the farm question. There are several families who have expressed willingness to take in." He stopped, chose a different word, he said, "to support you in whatever arrangement makes sense going forward." I looked at him. I said, "I have a home, I have a job, I have been supporting myself for 11 years. He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they are receiving information that does not fit into the category they have prepared. He said, "Of course, but you are part of this community, Hannah. You were Elam's wife. The church has a responsibility. The church has a responsibility." That sentence contained everything I needed to understand about what the next weeks would look like. In the 2 weeks I stayed to help my children settle the estate, the community procedure ran on a schedule I recognized from having grown up inside it. Day 3, the bishop's wife came with a meal and a long conversation about whether I had considered returning. Not urgently, conversationally. "The way you mentioned something you have been thinking about for a while." Day 5, an older widow named Clara was sent. I understood she had been sent to sit with me and describe her own widowhood, how the community had carried her, how she had not been alone for a single day, how the arrangement of her life had been managed so smoothly that she had not had to worry about a single practical matter. She said it the way you describe a blessing. She meant it as one. I understood it as a description of enclosure. Day 8, a man from a neighboring district, a widower, 50s, well-regarded, attended a shared meal at my daughter's home. He was not introduced to me directly. He was simply present, and there was a careful arrangement of seating and conversation that I recognized immediately as the opening movement of a process. I had been a widow for 8 days, the community was already solving me. I need to explain the practical dimensions of Amish widowhood, because the outside world does not understand how thoroughly a woman's material situation is managed by the community. The farm was in Elam's name, this is standard. Women in old order communities rarely hold property independently. The question of what happened to the farm was therefore a question the church elders and Elam's family had opinions about, strong opinions, expressed with complete conviction that they were acting in the interest of my children and in the interest of right order. There were conversations I was not included in, decisions that were presented to me as conclusions. A son-in-law who had been identified as the natural inheritor of the farm management, which was correct and which I did not contest, but which had been decided before anyone thought to ask whether I had a perspective. That is the design. Not malice. Design. A widow in that system is managed the way a farm is managed after a hard season, with efficiency and care, and the complete assumption that the managing requires people other than the widow herself. On day 10, Ruth found me. You have heard me speak of Ruth before. The woman who handed me a contact name at a clothesline years ago, when I was trying to find a way out. She was still in the community. She was older now, she walked with a cane. She came to the farmhouse on a morning when no one else was there, and she sat across from me at the same kitchen table where I had once sat with a deacon and a bishop and a long parade of people who wanted to manage what I was. She did not bring food. She did not bring advice. She said, "How are you, Hannah?" Not as a greeting, as a real question. I looked at her for a moment. I said, "I am figuring out what is mine." She nodded. She said, "Good. That is the right work." She stayed for an hour. We talked about her garden and my job and my grandchildren and the particular quality of October light over Ohio fields. We did not talk about the community's procedure or the widower from the neighboring district or the bishop's wife's gentle campaign. We just talked like two women. Like the community's categories did not exist for an hour. I have thought about that hour many times since, how much it cost her to simply treat me as a person and not a procedure. How much practice it must have taken, inside that system, to still know how to do that. You came to this video for an answer. I want to give it to you honestly. The first thing I did after burying my husband was stay in bed until I wanted to get up. The second thing I did was stand at a kitchen window for longer than was necessary and watch the sky change color without accounting for the time to anyone. The third thing I did, and this took 3 days, and it was the hardest of the 3, was tell the deacon, clearly and without apology, that I was not available to be solved. That I was grateful for the community's care. that I understood it came from genuine love, and that I was going home at the end of the 2 weeks to my home, to my life, to the self I had spent 11 years building after leaving, and that I did not require an arrangement. He was quiet for a long moment. He said, "We worry about you, Hannah." I said, "I know, but I'm not a worry, I'm a person." That sentence, "I am not a worry, I am a person." I had been practicing it for 11 years without knowing I was practicing it. Every therapy session, every hard choice, every morning I made a decision without asking permission, I had been practicing that sentence. It came out steady. It came out whole. When I came home and went back to my therapist, I described the 2 weeks. The deacon, Clara the widow, the widower at the dinner table, the property conversations I was not invited to, the bishop's wife's gentle campaign. My therapist listened to all of it, and then she said, "What you are describing is a system that has no framework for a woman who has already constructed her own life. The procedure exists because it was built for women who have no resources, no language, and no external identity. When a woman arrives who has those things, the system does not pause, it simply continues running the procedure, because the procedure is what it knows." She said, "The procedure was not designed for you, Hannah. It was designed for the woman you would have been if you had never left." I sat with that for a long time. The procedure was designed for the woman I would have been. That woman would have needed it. She would have had no bank account, no address, no profession, no language for her own interior experience. She would have been genuinely lost without the community's enclosure. The system produced that woman for generations, and then it built a procedure for her, and it had no way of knowing what to do when she showed up already whole. The deacon was not a controlling man. He was a man running a procedure built by generations of genuine communal care. Clara was not my enemy. She was a woman who had been carried by the system and who experienced that carrying as love, because for her, it had been. The community's instinct to enclose me was not malicious. It came from a real theology of mutual responsibility, a genuine belief that a woman alone is a woman at risk. The problem was not the care. The problem was the assumption embedded in the care that a widow's wholeness would always need to be constructed by others, that a woman could not arrive at her own grief already holding herself upright. That assumption is old. It is structural. It is not any one person's fault, but it shaped every decision made about me in those 2 weeks. And I am naming it not to indict the people who carried it, but because it needs to be named. This is an Amish story, but I want to speak more broadly. If you have ever lost a partner, through death, through leaving, through the slow end of something that used to be a marriage, and found that the people around you moved immediately to manage you, to solve you, to fit you into a category before you had taken a breath, then you know something of what I am describing. If grief was treated as a logistical problem before it was treated as a human experience, if your community's first instinct was procedure rather than presence, if the question of what you needed was never asked because the system already had an answer. I see you. You were not a category. You were a person inside a loss, and the first thing you were allowed to do after that loss, whatever it was yours. Not the procedure's yours. I want to name Ruth one more time. She has appeared in other videos, and she will appear again, because she keeps being the person who showed up without a procedure. Ruth, you came with nothing but an hour and a real question. In a week full of people managing me, you were the only one who sat across from me like I was already whole. That is a kind of witness I have not forgotten. There are people like Ruth in every community, people who have found, quietly and at some cost, how to set the procedure down for an hour, and simply be present. If you are one of them, you're doing something that matters more than you know. I buried my husband in October. The morning after, I stayed in bed until I wanted to get up. It was the smallest possible act of ownership. It was also the first morning in a long time that the decision was made by no one but me. Your grief belongs to you. Your next morning belongs to you. The procedure does not get to decide what you do with either. The morning is yours. Start there. If something in this video stayed with you, leave it below. You don't need to explain it. One word, one sentence, whatever you have. There is a version of what I cannot say fully here, the ordnung they never wrote down. The parts this platform does not permit. The link is below. Subscribe. The next video is about what happens to an Amish woman's money when her husband dies, who makes the decisions, who holds the accounts, and what I found when I finally saw the paperwork. That story surprised me. I think it will surprise you too. I will see you there.